Hey, what's going on, everyone? In this video, I'm going to be going over how to EQ your vocals. Let's jump right into it. The first thing we're going to want to do is pull up a high-pass filter and cut out some of the low end. A lot of these frequencies are rumble, inaudible frequencies, and really just bass frequencies that can kind of make your vocal sound a bit unclear. So I've got a high-pass loaded up. I'm using a 12 dB per octave slope. You can, change that based on what you like. Anything more than 6 dB per octave is going to do well. And I'm just going to dial this in. 190. I just want a subtle effect to scoop out some of the rumble and everything. Going like this, that's too much. We don't want to, cut out all that low end. We still want some energy from the low end in the vocal. Next, we're going to want to carve out some of the low mids, roughly in the 250 to 1000 hertz range. Now, this is going to vary vocal to vocal, and depending on the location, it's going to be more severe or less severe, but we want to cut out some of those to get some clarity from our vocal. Oftentimes, we have too much of these frequencies in our mix, and if we have too much of it, often gets a bit of a unpolished kind of amateur sound to our vocal, so we definitely want to make sure we are scooping out some of these frequencies. It is going to vary vocal to vocal, though. This vocal here, this is my vocal on the verse of a song. Without these mid moves right here, the vocal just sounds a bit unclear and undefined. So I'm going to show you what it sounds like with the EQ on, and then I'm going to take it off. I see a world of lies crafted. We're going to take off the EQ. And you can kind of, there's like this honk to it. And what I took out was pretty unique to my vocal. About 260 was just a bit too much there. Same with 385. 600, this is a notorious, like, kind of sonar frequency, I guess you could say. Sonar, because that's what it kind of sounds like, a radar ping. And about 1K as well. These are not the best. 900 hertz in particular for this recording. But even at the 1000 hertz spot, that could be a bit problematic. Something you're going to want to feel out. Every vocal is unique, but you want to check this area. Kind of do some broader EQ moves at first, and if you want to, you could get a bit more narrow like I did here. After that, it's worth cutting out some of the high mids, and depending on where the vocal was recorded and the vocalist, 3K, 4K, that can be a bit of a harsh area. So if you're noticing some harshness in your vocal, it's definitely worth investigating that area in general. If you don't have any harshness, there's no hard and fast rules. You don't necessarily have to scoop any of this out. Oftentimes, though, it can be very helpful. So we're going to be taking a look at some more extreme vocals here, some screams. And I did similar moves with the low mid, the low cut here. These moves were unique to this particular vocal. Reoccurring theme. The EQ moves you make on one vocal are not going to be exactly the same as another. These general areas are going to work for every vocal, but the exact moves, they're going to be different for each vocal. So with that out of the way, let's actually hear this vocal and some of the harshness I was getting. And I don't know if you can hear it, and you can almost kind of see it peak in here, roughly 3K. This was just too much. So a small little cut, that's all that I needed, and it sounds a lot softer. And finally, while your high end many times will be fine as is, if you're finding that you're lacking a little bit of air or clarity from your vocal, it's worth trying to boost 12K. That can give a bit of air to your vocal, and boosting 8K can sometimes make your vocal a bit more prominent in a pleasing way that's kind of clean, but you don't want to overdo either of these because you can quickly thin out your vocal and make it a bit harsh. But in many vocal recordings, you might not even need to touch this area. It might just do more harm than good. So if you do find yourself with some vocals that are a bit muffled, a little bit darker, and you've done your other moves, you could definitely try 12K and 8K to kind of bring some life to your vocal. So I'm just going to boost a bit of 12K roughly with this high shelf, and bring in some 8K. Kind of a wider Q value. 8K makes a bigger difference, and it's just nice if you want to, get your vocal a bit more prominent in the mix and kind of do it in a nice, clean way that brings out the presence a bit. Now that's the majority of the EQing you're going to need to do on your vocals, and if you followed along, you should have a pretty good sounding vocal. However, I want to cover a couple things that aren't always covered by other tutorial videos that can be very helpful. Dynamic cuts, they're very useful, especially when you're having a problematic area. Sometimes your low mids are just like jumping all over the place or inconsistent. A dynamic cut or a bell on your EQ that's dynamically clamping down a certain area, that can be very useful. But primarily what I'll use a dynamic cut for is a resonance frequency that just keeps jumping out only in particular sections. It's not, constant, so a static cut isn't the best. That's where a dynamic cut can come in clutch, kind of fix your vocal without neutering it too much. So I had an issue with the lead vocal on this song, and roughly 795 hertz was just popping out during certain words at a certain pitch, and I needed to notch that out. It was especially prominent when I heard it on my laptop speakers, and that's what really made me notice it, because those are mid-range heavy speakers, and once I heard it, it was kind of like one of those things that's like, okay, this needs to be taken out. So I've got the notch, dynamic notch, muted, and as you can see right there, you can visually see it sticking out. You obviously want to use your ears, but we can clearly see that sticking out there. So what I did is a dynamic cut, very narrow Q value, and you can see it's only coming in at certain points. And that's especially helpful, especially on the vocal bus. That's where it's at. When you've got multiple vocalists singing that same word, that same phrase, the same pitch, all of that builds up and it kind of just like sticks out in the mix in a not so pleasing way. If you've got an issue like that, a dynamic notch will do the trick. Sometimes you don't always nail the EQ moves on individual vocals, so having an EQ on your vocal bus, if you have one, can be a big time saver and also help you sculpt the rest of your vocals in a much more pleasing and fitting way for the mix. So with my vocal in particular on the verse of a song, all the EQ moves I made were good, but there was just like a buildup in like the mid-range, kind of like how I was talking about 1K previously. There's just a bit too much of that, and there's just these little tiny moves that I made just to get the vocal to sit where I wanted it to be. And if we listen without these EQ moves, it doesn't sound terrible, but we engage the EQ, cleans up quite a bit. And in the context of the mix, that was just a big deal. And you're not always going to nail the EQ moves on the individual tracks, so having an EQ on the bus can really help save you time and get you sculpting your vocal the way you want it to be. And I hate to bring up third-party plugins, but a dynamics resonance suppressor like Soothe 2 or others can be extremely helpful if you've done everything you could think of under the sun with an EQ and you're still running into problems. So this main vocal was a bit harsh, and I did everything EQ-wise that I could think of to reduce the harshness and, not make it sound like it was muffled, and everything that I did, it just was not getting rid of that harshness. So I brought in Soothe 2. Now Soothe 2 is not engaged. This is you hearing it without it. And hopefully you can hear some of the harshness going on. And we're going to engage Soothe 2 now. We'll take it off. A bit subtle, but in the context of the mix, it just really helped get the vocal where I wanted it to be, especially because there were multiple vocalists in this and nobody's having this harshness issue. So that's where plugins like Soothe 2 can be helpful. Doesn't have to be this plugin in particular. There's other dynamic suppressors out there, or dynamic resonance suppressors out there that can help you out. And that's how you EQ your vocals. Now, if you're new to mixing, you're not going to be amazing at this at the very start. But if you follow along with this video, you're going to get some pretty good results. And as you continue on your mixing journey, you're probably going to discover your own EQ moves that you personally like. This is an art form. There's no, set rules. What I'm doing is, stuff that I've learned over the years from tutorials and experience, and I hope it was very helpful for you. So if you got any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I do hope to see you in the next video.